Welcome to She is Resilient, a podcast for women on their healing journeys who are ready to start living their most authentic and empowered lives outside of survival mode. I'm your host, Tatiana, trauma and somatic therapist, as well as a holistic coach, and I'm on a mission to help more women heal their nervous systems. Each week, me and my guests are going to get real and vulnerable about the experiences that led us to becoming the empowered and resilient women we are today. You'll leave this podcast with the skills, knowledge, and inspiration to start creating the life you deserve. Because if another woman can do it, so can you. Welcome to another episode of She is Resilient. Today we're talking all about how to start embracing vulnerability. I initially wanted to make this episode about trauma, but I was so inspired by all of you who sent me such sweet messages thanking me for being so authentic and vulnerable in the first episode. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how to embrace vulnerability because it definitely wasn't always this way for me. And also, as a side note, I'm just recovering from a cold, so if I sound a little congested or if you hear me sniffling, that is why. So, before I started my somatic healing journey, I used to be a very closed book when it came to my personal life. And as a therapist, this worked really great for me, right? Because you learn very early on in grad school that as a therapist, your life needs to be completely private and it's inappropriate to disclose things about your personal life in the therapy room unless it's going to benefit the client. So that was really easy for me because I didn't like sharing anything about my personal life with clients. But here's the thing. I also didn't really like sharing personal things with other people, like friends and other people who were close to me. I was really guarded and hyper independent. And I felt like I really didn't need to open up to anyone because there was this underlying belief that I didn't need anyone, that I could handle things all by myself. And when we look at this from a nervous system lens, this is a sign that the fight state is activated. So it's very clear to me now when I come across someone who is guarded or hyper independent that their nervous system is in this state of sympathetic activation. So how do we start embracing vulnerability, right? Because telling someone it's okay to be vulnerable is a lot easier said than done. So it starts with the nervous system. Not a surprise there, probably. The reason why vulnerability is so hard for some people is because the nervous system doesn't have the capacity for vulnerability. The nervous system experiences vulnerability as risky and dangerous. And so whenever there's even a small bit of vulnerability, the nervous system will immediately go into survival because it's too much for the system. So the goal is to slowly grow the capacity for vulnerability so that eventually your nervous system doesn't become flooded anytime you share your vulnerabilities, or so that you can be more vulnerable more naturally and it's not so forced. So the way that you do this is by first creating safety in the nervous system. Creating safety is always the number one step when it comes to healing a dysregulated nervous system. In episode 2, we talked about 3 ways to create safety in the nervous system, which were connecting with pleasant sensations and emotions in the body, orienting, and the VU sound. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I invite you to go back to it so that you can get a better understanding of these tools. So that's step 1 to growing your capacity for vulnerability. Once you've created enough safety in your body, you want to expose your body to the slightest bit of vulnerability. And I mean like super tiny, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, I'd say like a 3. So notice how your body feels when it's exposed to that level 3 of vulnerability. Then use your somatic resources, whether they're internal or external, and then just support your nervous system and just give it plenty of time and space. Then slowly, you want to increase the level of vulnerability. So maybe going from a 3 to a 5, and then coming right back to your supports, giving it time, and so on and so forth. And so we want to be careful of not increasing the level of vulnerability, not going straight to like an 8 or a 9 without having safety in the body, without having that container of supports. You want to do it very intentionally, very slowly, and spending a lot of time with the supports in your body. Obviously, this isn't going to happen in one day. It's a very slow process. But this is one of the exact methods that I use with my clients in somatic experiencing. And it's something that's called pendulating, a term used by Peter Levine, who is the founder of somatic experiencing. So the reason it's called pendulating is because we're moving very slowly back and forth between settling in the body and activation in the body. Pendulating is what a healthy or regulated nervous system does. It goes into a state of sympathetic activation, and then it can come back down to a parasympathetic state. But a nervous system that's experienced trauma can't do this. A nervous system that's dysregulated goes into a sympathetic state of activation and it gets stuck there. And then it may come back down to a dorsal vagal state instead of a parasympathetic state. And so it can't pendulate. It can't have that flexibility and flow. So in somatic experiencing, that's what we're doing. We're retraining the nervous system to pendulate. And over time, the nervous system will learn how to naturally pendulate on its own without becoming overwhelmed. And as I'm saying this, I'm also thinking that it might be a good idea to do an episode on Nervous System 101 so that you really understand what I'm talking about. So if that's something that you want me to do, just let me know. So yeah, that's a brief overview of how to start increasing the capacity for vulnerability in your nervous system. And it's truly the same thing when it comes to all things like confidence, accessing your most authentic self, receiving compliments, things like that. It always comes down to the level of capacity that your nervous system has. So I hope that makes sense to you. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to me on Instagram. I would love to answer all of your questions, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you absolutely loved this episode, I would so appreciate it if you subscribed and left a review on Apple Podcast, or take a screenshot and share this episode on social media. Don't forget to tag me at tatiana.holistic.coach. The more nervous systems we reach, the more generational cycles we break, and the more we contribute to a kinder and safer world. And if you're looking for somatic healing services, send me a DM and I'd love to chat on how I can support you. I'll see you in the next episode.